Hey everybody, in this video, I'm going to explain to you the skills practice for level 5 of exploring creation with mathematics. If you're familiar with the series and you kind of know how this works, so feel free to jump ahead to the chapters that I've put in here on the different units. But for those of you who are new, the skills practice is a spiraling review where you practice one specific skill each day for about 5 to 10 minutes. It's something that kids should have already learned either in this book or maybe in a previous year, and it's just to help them really solidify that skill till it's automatic and fluid. It's all explained in the teaching guide, so you do need the teaching guide for the program for many reasons, but one of the top reasons is I explain in detail how to do the skills practice in here. I'm just going to put that information in a video for you here if you want a quick overview to kind of help you get your mind around how to do this. So in the teaching guide, there is this suggested daily schedule, which is so helpful for so many reasons. But one reason is that underneath each lesson, it has this skill practice that you need to do that day broken down so you can see it quickly and at a glance. In addition to that, when you get into each new unit in the teaching guide, it will explain to you in detail what the skills practice is for that unit and give you a bunch of ideas on how to practice. I'm going to be showing you a bunch of those ideas here in this video, as well as giving a few other suggestions on how we make it happen in our house. The skills practice for Unit 1 actually has 3 skills, and they're all skills that your child should have already learned in a previous level. It's definitely covered in this series, but if you're coming in from another program, it's assumed that they already learned these. So it's adding 3-digit numbers, subtracting 3-digit numbers, and multiplying a 2-digit number by a 2-digit number. If your child's pretty strong in these skills, it is fine to kind of assess, okay, they've got this, and then skip the skills practice, where it repeats that. If your child isn't strong in this, don't panic, but slow down. Maybe spend a few more days working on this skill than what I've suggested for you, because it varies kid to kid. All right, so we're gonna keep this really simple. Here's some ideas for adding 3-digit numbers. So the main thing that we do in our house is what I call note card facts in the teaching guide. It's as simple as it sounds. I literally write a problem on a note card. A lot of times, actually, I do it on a Post-it note, and I stick it on their math book, and they know they're supposed to do that fact before they open their book and do the lesson for the day. Really only one problem a lot of times is what I do, but I'll tell them if you get one right, you're done. And then they focus, they do one right, and we move on. To spice things up, sometimes it's fun to do a fact where I have the sum and they have to fill in the missing add-in. And especially with regrouping, this can be a little tricky, a little fun, and it makes them really think. So I like to do something like that. We also have a game called Make the Greatest Sum. To play Make the Greatest Sum, each player picks 6 cards. We use Uno cards. It can be any kind of numbered cards. Uno's great because the digits are nice and big. So each player would get 6 of their own cards. And they then arrange those in an addition problem. They can put the digits wherever they want. So I'm going to do 932 plus 741. And I would go ahead and add this while the other player is adding their problem. Whoever has the greatest sum wins. It ends up having them really practice some great regrouping and things like that and seeing what happens, but they're just trying to win. One more idea for practicing adding 3-digit numbers is to get some of the resources off the Book Extras website. So in the beginning of your student book, if you go into the front pages, there is all the information you need to get onto that website. There's a password. Check that out. I would highly recommend checking it out before you start and downloading the PDF we have of extra materials just so you know what's there. There's a lot there that you can use. So for adding 3-digit numbers, we have worksheets like this, just a nice clean worksheet that kids can complete, and we have several different versions. When we use these in my house, I don't have my child do a whole worksheet in one day. I might have them just do 1 or 2 rows or something like that and break it up over a couple days. So that's adding 3-digit numbers. Subtracting 3-digit numbers is going to really parallel what we did for addition. So if your child liked note card facts or Post-it facts, do the same thing. It's just now it's subtraction. You could do this same type of thing, except it's a subtraction fact, and they have to figure out what are you subtracting, that type of thing. We played Make the Greatest Sum. Here's how you play Make the Greatest Difference. To play Make the Greatest Difference, it's very similar to Make the Greatest Sum, except you are going to take your 6 cards, and this time you are trying to subtract to get the largest difference. And so kids have to think about place value and what would make the most sense, and then go ahead and subtract. And whichever player has the greatest difference wins. And just like we had addition worksheets on the Book Extras website, we have subtraction worksheets. Okay, I just really wouldn't overcomplicate this. This is Unit 1. You're most likely starting your school year. You don't need to make it harder or more involved at this point. Finally, you want to have them practice multiplying a 2-digit number by a 2-digit number. So again, you can do that note card fact idea, and we actually have some suggested problems that we put in here for you that you can copy in case you're, having trouble thinking up a problem and you want to just have someone tell you what to do. And we have a game called Draw and Multiply. So what you do is each player gets 4 cards, and they're going to arrange this into a multiplication problem. And you're trying to get the largest product. And so even though this is going to be a difficult multiplication problem, I would do 92 times 97. And so the one thing that's cool is, since you're trying to get the larger product, you're motivated to, still do a difficult problem. When you are playing Draw and Multiply, players get to check their work on a calculator. Also, you definitely want to have each player with a notebook or some type of paper next to them so that they are writing out the problem and doing the multiplication over here. You don't want to be doing it in your head. It will be too challenging. The skill that we're going to practice for Unit 2 is long division. So I broke it into 2 parts, long division where we're dividing by a single-digit number, and long division where we're dividing by a 2-digit number. This is a tough skill. It's a long process with a lot of steps, so you want to make sure you keep it short enough. So one of the main suggestions is to do note card facts, and in this case, I'm talking about one problem. You give your child one long division problem to do each day. I think a lot of times what happens to kids is long division is so long and then they just fatigue and then they start making mistakes, and we don't really know what they know and what they don't know. So definitely think about keeping it as simple as that. That's one reason I put it in here with the skills practice, to spread it out over a bunch of days so that kids can just do a little bit of it each day, but make sure they really have the skill down because it is important. All right, there are worksheets. So if you are looking for a worksheet, keep in mind that you don't have to have your child do the whole worksheet in one day, okay? You could even say do 1 or 2 problems from this in place of you writing things on a note card. These are on the Book Extras website, all right? We have different levels, whether there's remainders or not. These here are dividing by a single-digit number. We do have them for dividing by a 2-digit number, so you can go and check out these. Another kind of like a little more interesting thing is to have your child make up their own long division problem and solve it. So this is to kind of try to spice it up so that they can do something different. So how do they do this? Well, how I suggest they do it is that they multiply something by something to get that problems that'll come out evenly. So for instance, you could have them do, let's say they do 7 times 129, and they do that math, and they realize that's 903. And so then they would write the long division problem, 903 divided by 7, and they already know they're going to get 129. But writing out the steps helps them practice that divide, multiply, subtract, bring down. And again, they're just doing one problem for that. All right, with the 2-digit numbers, same things, note card facts, worksheets. The other thing is there is another method that sometimes students really like, especially when you're dividing by a 2-digit number, and that's repeated subtraction. So we do have a worksheet on the Book Extras site. If your child prefers that method, I'm just going to show it real quick in case you're like, what is this dividing with repeated subtraction? I'm actually a big fan, but at this level, students can pick if they prefer the traditional long division or the repeated subtraction. Let's look at the problem 979 divided by 11. So if you do this using traditional long division, it looks like this. Most kids struggle right here. How many times does 11 go into 97? And that step can really trip kids up. So the advantage of repeated subtraction is it doesn't have that step right there. So what you do is you start by subtracting something, okay? Some multiple of 11. So I'm going to subtract 110, okay? So that is 10 times 11. And this just gets me started. You could start this a bunch of different ways. All right, now I have 869. So you know what? I'm going to subtract 220. It's 20 times. All right, I will subtract another, what am I going to do, 440. Okay, I'm going to subtract another 110. This is 9, this is 99. Oh, okay, so I'm going to subtract 99, which is another 9 times. So every time you subtract an 11, you're keeping track over here. So I got all the way down to 0, so that's how I know I'm done. And I subtracted 11, 10, 20, 30, 70, 80, 89 times. So the answer is 89. So you're essentially subtracting 11 from 979, and you keep doing that until you get to 0. And however many times it took you is your quotient. So the skills practice for Unit 3 is operations with fractions. We're going to be doing addition, subtraction, and then multiplication. There are so many fun ways to practice this one, so this is a great skills practice to jazz things up a little bit. Let me show you the most straightforward thing, and then I'm going to flip my camera around and show you all the fun ways you can do this. So we, of course, have provided worksheets for you on the Book Extras website. So you can go and grab addition, subtraction, or multiplication fraction worksheets and call it a day. All right, here's some other ideas. So this first one is pattern block grab. And if you've never used pattern blocks for fractions, first of all, you don't use the squares and you don't use these skinny parallelograms. So you would remove those from your set. When we're using pattern blocks to talk about fractions, this is going to be our 1 whole. And so then that means the red pieces are 1/2, because see how they're half of your whole. The blue pieces are 1/3. And the green pieces are 1/6, okay? If you've been using Exploring Creation with Mathematics, we've used these before, but I just want to make sure no one's lost. So put these in like a bag or something, and kids reach in and they grab pieces, and then that becomes their addition problem, 1/3 plus 1/2. And they can use paper to add this, to figure it out, and then they can also check their answer. So the answer is 5/6, and you can actually see, using these pattern blocks, you can visually see that you have the right answer, okay? You can do the same thing in terms of subtraction. You know, in this case, you're going to be grabbing and subtracting. Just make sure, you know, maybe you grab 2 pieces and then 1 piece. And so this is going to be 5/6 take away 1/6 or something like that to kind of come up with some problems. You can also do the pattern block grab for multiplication, where you just grab, you grab 2 pieces. I got 1/3 and 1/6. And so then you're actually going to multiply 1/3 times 1/6. In that case, you can't check your answer because it's not going to have a visual answer. But just kind of a fun way of basically using the pattern blocks to generate your problems. Okay, another thing is to get your fraction tiles out. So these are used in a bunch of levels of Apologia Math. I just want to show you, because in case you're not familiar, there's a 1 tile, and then all the other tiles kind of fit with that relationship. So 2 halves, when you put them together, make 1. 3/3 makes 1. Okay, so the size is kind of how they work. So, you know, same thing. You can give them addition problem and just have them act it out with tiles. So if you give them 1/5 plus 1/4, they can solve it on paper, but then they'll also be able to sort of check their answer. They can check it using equivalent tiles or just by kind of having a visual with them. Same thing, you can have them use the tiles to act out their answers to a subtraction problem. Just trying to make it a little more hands-on. Another thing you can do, this isn't in the book, but I think this one's fun, is you can use dominoes. So basically, certain dominoes don't work. You can't have any dominoes that have zeros, but basically they just grab 2 dominoes. And so this would be 4/5 and this would be 3/4. And then you could decide what you want them to do. Do you want them to add? Do you want them to subtract? Do you want them to multiply? And of course, have them simplify. So I think that that makes it fun. It's something different. Oh, look, that one's an easy one because they get 1. So just trying to keep it lively, right? All right, another thing is in lesson 25 of the program, they played fraction bingo, and it was just for recognition, but it came with all these fraction cards. So we're not gonna do bingo because we're trying to do operations, not recognition, but you can use these cards. Again, you know, you have these, you were told to save them in an envelope, and just have them pick 2 cards, and then they have to add those or subtract those or multiply those, just to keep things interesting. One other note on the fractions, in case you have a child who's competitive, we're competitive in our house, so we always love to win. That tends to split kids. Some kids don't like that. But you can really change any of those ideas I just did into a game if you say, well, who can get the larger sum, or who can get the larger difference, or the larger product. So, you know, for instance, with the dominoes that I showed, each player picks 2 dominoes. They get to decide how to orient them, all right? So maybe you'll even have people doing improper fractions. I don't know how competitive you are in your house. And then if they are adding them, whoever gets the larger sum wins that round. So that's how you turn it into a game. So the skills practice for Unit 4 is adding and subtracting decimals. As always, you can go on the Book Extras website and just print off some worksheets to have your child practice that way. Also, you can use games that they've already done in the lessons. So this would probably be my favorite way to play. There's this decimal bingo that you did in lesson 52. So you have the cards and you have the collar sheet, which is different decimal problems. And so depending on the sum or difference, they cover different spaces. We have, you know, you can print more bingo cards and play that. And the collar can call things out in a different order. That's a great way to practice. You can also do note cards, especially with the subtraction. We gave you a bunch of problems right here. Whoops, sorry. Right here. So you can just copy those and have your child practice so they can get the practice in with adding and subtracting decimals. A fun thing to do here is to let them check answers with a calculator because kids like using calculators, and then it also gives them practice checking their work. The skills practice for Unit 5 is multiples, factors, prime numbers, and composite numbers. I put the prime and composite with the factors and multiples because it's related. This is so key for middle school and high school that your child has a good foundation in this. So please, like anytime you invest now, you're gonna be so grateful. Your child's gonna be so grateful. I say that because I taught high school math for many years before I came home to teach my kids at home. So trust me, okay? So let's start with multiples and factors. Let's start with that first. So one of the easiest things you can do is go on the Book Extras website and print factors tables worksheet. So this is just where we make a table of the factors of different numbers, and it's really well organized. And this is kind of scaffolded for kids because we have the correct number of rows. So this game is called Prime Sum. So you start by setting up a 5x5 grid of numbered cards. They don't have to be Uno cards. They could be regular playing cards. That's fine. When it's your turn, you get to flip over 2 cards and you add them together. Okay, so in this case, I have 9 plus 2, that's 11. If the sum is prime, that's a match. Well, not really a match, but you get to take the 2 cards and you get a point. If, on the other hand, I had flipped over 2 cards and I got a composite, 9 plus 3 is 12, you flip it back over and your turn is over. The first player to get 10 matches wins. When you take a match, you would then replace those with 2 more, okay? It really helps you both do memory and start to think like, oh, okay, 5 is prime, because you have to think a little harder than you might think to get a prime match. All right, another game that you can play is called Pick a Prime. So pick a prime is pretty straightforward. You have two players, and when it's your turn, I guess you could have more than two players. When it's your turn, you pick two cards, and you can do anything you want really with these cards. You can make a number, 68, 86. You could add them. 8 plus 6 is 14. You could subtract them. 8 take away 6 is 2. Anything you can to try to get a prime number. In this case, I can score 0 points because there's no way to make a prime. Let me give another example. So I would get 0 on that turn. Okay, good. This is a great example. So if I have 2 and 5, 25 won't work, right? 52 isn't prime, but 2 plus 5 is 7. So that's a point, right? 2 times 5 is 10. Oh, 5 take away 2 is 3. So I would get 2 points on that round. Okay, and then it would be the other person's team. And you keep going back and forth. You also can slightly change it to pick a composite. And in that case, you have your 2 cards, but this time you're trying to not get primes. So 48, that's a point. 84, that's a point. 8 plus 4 is 12, that's a point. 8 away 4 is 12, that's a point, right? And you end up getting more points if you play pick a composite. But in all of these, you're totally going to get really familiar with your prime numbers. And it's totally fine if people are playing with a list of the primes next to them that they're checking against. The skills practice for Unit 6, woohoo, last unit, is percents and then fractions, decimals, and percents together. This is a really key skill, and I feel like I always say this, but I only put skills in the skills practice if they're worth your time. So anytime I'm asking you to have your child work on something every day, you can know it's because I know it's worth it. All right, so for percents, we have on the Book Extras website some fun activities like this. This is sort of percent awareness, where they have to match the shaded grid to the correct percent. Just really making sure kids understand what a percent is and what it looks like, that visual representation. We have worksheets like this where they need to shade in to show the percent, just getting them really familiar with those benchmark percents. Percent of a number task card. This is probably my favorite activity on there. So this you print front and back. And so the answers are actually gonna be on the back. There are 12 of these, just problems like 35% of 200. The idea is that you give your child one and they just try to find it and then they can check their answer, okay? They can use their benchmark percents or decimals, that type of thing, to figure out that, or fractions. Different kids do those different ways. All right. Also, they can take some time to find percents on a calculator, whether you want to use these problems or actually we listed some in the parent guide answer key. I don't want them to only be able to do percents on a calculator, but you do want them to know how to do something like 30% of 20 on a calculator really quickly. So it's okay to take a few days where they're doing that on a calculator. Once you feel good about all those percent skills, now we're doing fractions, decimals, and percents together. This is one of my favorite things to have kids do. This is on the Book Extras website where they just complete the table and they just want to be able to go backwards and forwards, no problem, between these 3 different forms. Also, there are some things in the book that you can practice again. So in lesson 89, they had these really fun dominoes. Can you see the picture? And they matched equivalent fractions, decimals, and percents with those dominoes. So you can whip those out and just have them use those again to practice. I mean, it's so fun, right? You're already familiar with it. There's no need to only do it once. There's a really cool puzzle that we had them do in lesson 90 where they cut apart this and then to put it together again, you have to match equivalent fractions, decimals, and percents. So you can go ahead and have them do that. Just remember a little bit each day and get them to mastery.